Hello and Grüß Gott. Hey, today I'm going to take care of a couple of maintenance issues I found on my 2012 BMW F650GS. I did the 600 mile PM, and during the PM I discovered that the radiator fluid was a bit too low. It's actually, when it's hot, it comes up about to the bottom mark, and when it's cooled down, it seems to go down a little bit below that. So what I'm going to do is, I got some BMW Antifreeze. You have to use their exact specification coolant in order to keep your warranty. And this is going to be mixed 50-50. So I have a clean measuring cup, and I'm going to measure out some fluid, and then I'm going to mix it with some distilled water to make it 50-50. Also, you'll notice I labeled my container. I like to do that so I know how old something is. So in a year or two, when I need to use it, I'll know it's not too old. So I'm going to start out by putting in a little bit of antifreeze into this container. And I will take it up to about 200 milliliters or so, I think. Which should be more than enough for topping up the reservoir once I mix it with some distilled water. Okay, so now I'm going to bring this up to a total of around 400 or so. Need to go a little further. And I can just kind of mix it up this way. I don't think I have to actually stir it with anything. And then you're going to need a special funnel such as this one here in order to put the fluid into the radiator. So over here on the bike, I have the handlebars turned to the left, and that allows me to reach down there and take the cap off the radiator reservoir. And I'm going to take the cap off and set it aside. Then I'm going to place this funnel in there very carefully. And then I'm going to have to get a flashlight so I can see what I'm doing. Or perhaps there might be enough light to see what I'm doing without it. So I'm going to pour a little bit of fluid in very slowly and see if I can reach the uppermost radiator mark. So I put a little fluid in. I definitely have to get a light to check it, so I'm going to do that and I'll be right back. Okay, so I got myself a good LED light, and I did add just a tiny bit more to bring it up to the top level mark, and the bike is cold. You don't really want to add fluid when the bike's hot. Theoretically, you could crack the block, but that would be very unlikely. That's usually when you add cold water to a hot engine, when you actually add it to the engine itself. So when you're just adding it to the reservoir, it shouldn't be a problem. But I prefer you do it with a cold bike anyway, so that we can get a good accurate reading. So I'm able to extricate my funnel and set it aside and reinstall my cap. And that's just going to be snugged by hand. And that should take care of that maintenance item. Okay, the second maintenance item is from my 600 mile checkup. It has to do with the skid plate, which is down here. And when I took it off to do the oil change, I found out the dealer had apparently used an air impact driver and snapped off some of these nuts, or some of the threads leading off of here. These are actually like isoelastic suspension members. They have two bolts sticking out of a rubber piece, and that's to dampen low frequency and middle frequency vibrations, so that the skid plate can sort of vibrate if it needs to without damage or cracking. And so I'm going to replace those, and I'm going to torque them into the proper spec. And so what I'm going to do is take that off, and then I'll return and I'll show you how to put it all back together the right way. Okay, I've removed the old pieces and taken the skid plate off, and I'm ready to start with the installation of the new one. A couple things I want to note. One is there's a long end and a short end. In the instructions, it clearly says the long end goes into the oil pan, and this part here is for the nut that retains that part right there. So as you can see, the dealer snapped off a couple of these with by using an impact driver. So, you know, the Russians have a good word for this kind of work. It's called gavno. And the person that does this kind of work is called a sukoyobanov. You won't find those in the English-Russian dictionary, that's for sure. So I'm going to actually put some Loctite on these, and I'm going to torque them into 19 Newton meters. So I've set up my torque wrench, and interestingly enough, this is a 13/16 spark plug wrench. It happens to fit exactly on this part. I had to use an adapter to make it fit onto my torque wrench. So I've got my adapter on here. I've got it set for 19 Newton meters. So I'm going to put some Loctite on each of these, and I'm going to torque them into 19 Newton meters, and then we'll come right back. All right, I've installed the isoelastic pieces. There's 4 of them. It says to tighten them up at 19 Newton meters. That's really not possible, at least with the tools I have, and I have pretty much everything. Because the problem is, unless you're able to get past the end of that collar, then you end up trying to twist the rubber off, and I don't want to end up snapping the rubber off this isoelastic suspension piece. So I snugged them up real good, probably 3 or 4 Newton meters. Should be plenty adequate, because when I put the skid plate on, I'm using Loctite both on that end and on the other piece on these nuts. And when I Loctite them and hold them in place, they're not going to go anywhere. They're not going to come loose or anything, so that should be fine. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the long end goes up into the pan, the sump pan here, and then the short end is sticking out here. So now I'm ready to take the pan here and start to install it. So I'm going to put this on and put the nuts on, and just loosely in the back, and then we'll come right back. Okay, I've put the 13 millimeter nuts on, but only loosely. I just got them started so I can wiggle this. And then this bolt has to go in here, and it doesn't give a torque setting. So I'm going to have to get it inserted in there and wiggle it all the way through, and then hand tighten it. And I'll do that, and I'll come right back. Okay, I've fed that bolt in. It uses a T45 Torx. So all I'm trying to do right now at this moment is just get it barely snugged up, because I want to be able to come in and tighten it up. But when I tighten these pieces up under here, I want it loose enough to where I can work the whole thing. So I'm just gonna barely snug it there. Then I'm going to take my hand 8 Newton meter torque wrench and see if I can actually get enough leverage to get 8 Newton meters. That's a tremendous amount to do with just your hand. So I'm going to go ahead and snug these up. And I think I'm going to have to use 2 hands. Got it. So that's 8 Newton meters, which is what the BMW specification calls for. Not 108 like an impact wrench would do. Okay, so that's 2 out of the 4. 3. They put an inconvenient center stand here. Okay, got those. Okay, now on this part here, it doesn't say what the torque setting is. So I put some Loctite on it, and I'm just going to hand snug it. That's probably about 10 Newton meters. And that's it. We're done. Thanks for watching.